Hey everyone, hope you're doing well and welcome to the new year. So, I've been playing around with a couple of early stage sales tools, specifically Gumroad and InstaMojo. And in particular, InstaMojo's design wanted me to, made me feel like talking about this particular topic, which is, um, you know, modeling and kind of like building out a organic sales plan. So let's just call it Sales 101 to go with because it's actually quite fun and it takes a first principle look at sales. So sales has existed for a long time. So there's nothing specifically new. It's been there since when there was the barter system. But we definitely need tooling along the way that rhymes with our times to kind of help us make sales happen. So Salesforce is one of those giants that has existed in the space since the 90s, since the late 90s, and has built out the entire SaaS ecosystem. So I think we are at the cusp of another wave of building out a more complex system-driven approach to modeling systems and building out new products. So the reason is that, and I'll come to that because when you operate with certain basic principles and rules, and you can kind of like build arbitrarily complex systems, you get interesting behavior based on the dynamics. And I'll just use sales here to as an example, but you could technically do this with any problem definition. And also, I wanted to just cite out Stephen Wolfram's physics project that has kind of like been leading the edge on many of these innovations in science. So let's start with sales. What is sales? You have a product, and your product is in a box, right? Your product is in a box, and we'll just take a 2D definition of a box here. And I'm assuming that the box itself contains a price that you're experimenting with or you're like testing out. And this is what you have on the offering, and you have a customer who is going to take a look at it and potentially make a purchase with some probability P. So you can obviously optimize this for this single, this is a very simplistic system. But like you could potentially optimize P in relation to the price, and you could have like some kind of a balance here. Taking this very simplistic look is kind of enough to extend it to all possible systems, So the way we do that is we'll just go to a new page first. So we'll go to new page and we will continue the second definition. So let's say there is a seller, and a seller is making a pitch to a buyer. The seller contains a product, and there are two variables: the probability of making the sale and the price. I mean, these are the variables around which it's optimized. And then you have a buyer. So along with this, if we add one more condition here, saying that a reseller option. So this is what InstaMojo does. So when you actually make the sale, it also gives you a reseller option, which is attached to the buyer. So it contains a margin, and typically this could be say 5 to 10% compared to say 2.9% for Stripe. It's a little higher, but it's a kind of a different network based model, right? It's a word of mouth based model. So I would expect it to be a little higher. And along with this margin, the buyer also becomes able to make the sale again. So seller status. So he or she gets seller status that they can also use to make the sale. So these three conditions are basically the variables that kind of drive growth. P, price, and reseller status. So the cool thing here is, if you actually take this one piece of the puzzle, which is the reseller status, because the P and the price are the same. I mean, the probability of making the sale and the price, I'm assuming, is kind of the same as in the previous condition. But definitely the probability of making the sale is affected by the reseller status as well. Because if the buyer is also going to become a reseller, then he or she is also going to be more invested in the product. And also, you cannot become a reseller without using the product. So these are some constraints on the system, although they're kind of implicit. So this way of defining a sales process is like called, it's a very first principle based approach where you define the rules. So you have a set of rules, and in fact, you have a list of rules, and you just apply them to different, variables, whatever you put them here. So here you have like 3 variables, and you also have the identity of the seller and the buyer. So maybe 2 more. And then you can just keep going along, you can just, I'm just writing this in currying notation of programming, but basically you have a set of rules and a rule function that you are kind of applying to each of these 5 variables here. And that drives the entire network based process. So InstaMojo does exactly this. So InstaMojo's webpage is directly representative of this, and it's kind of beautiful because I think this is the next era of sales growth or sales modeling. Because what happens here is the link that they use. So they basically use a link to emphasize the model. So this P and price, the product is contained in something called a link URL. So it is a particular well-defined page that can be crafted for that particular product. And it's not the whole store. It's not like Shopify. It's exactly one product. So you can build a store on this, and I'll come to that like as part of the ecosystem play. But right now it's just like every product is just one link URL. And you could put a URL shortener on this like we talked about. You could put this in a box and you put a URL shortener here. And this will give you all the details on the analytics for how the product sales page is being accessed. Very similar to how people reverse engineer and try to get data on Amazon seller pages and so on. So this is kind of very organic, and I'll come to the interesting thing about this is the complexity at play. So it removes a lot of that complexity and focuses on the core aspect of selling, which is, I think, very beautiful because the way you think about sales, the way you structure sales as an organization, everything changes. And the next step is, of course, what will the ecosystem contribute, So we'll kind of make a new page for that. So what I mean by the third aspect is, I think the biggest change is like that change beneficiaries are in the ecosystem, because you have all these storefronts, So storefronts are like, I would say, companies like Shopify. They'll all benefit because you can also build your same model on top of InstaMojo, or Gumroad. And the advantage that this kind of structure offers is with reseller model. I don't think Gumroad has a reseller model, but I'm sure they can implement it if they want. But the advantage this kind of thing offers is you can build analytics and everything separately. So you could have a company A focused on just analytics, let's say geo analytics for sales. And this would be an independent entity that just kind of trying to model this complex behavior as the growth happens according to the rules that we have seen earlier. And you can also do something called a drop. So the drop is basically a company that specializes in enhancing the effects of the network play. So you can say a Facebook drop is basically like putting your sales link into Facebook. Or you could use a Google drop, which is like making your sales page indexable. And you could also do a bunch of these things. So there are clear networks where already there are advantages, and the advantage of modeling your sales system in this model is you'll be able to see how each of these places or networks is contributing to your sales play, to your sales force. So assuming or if they're providing a damping effect, or are they kind of like enhancing it and helping you shoot out of the park. So it's a very simple model. It kind of helps you build out a ton of tools. Many companies like this, this tends to infinity. There's like many companies that you can keep on building. And the cool thing is even the storefront becomes, it's almost like a box. And there's a box within a box. And this is the storefront. And this is, the reseller model based like core payment pages, the main sales, inner core of the sales. So I think thinking about this model, it helps you really structure things really well. So we can go to a new page and just see what are the key elements that help us, defining sales here. So in this new model, the sales 101 thing consists of measuring P, which is the probability of a sale. But remember, this is very, very specific because it's between two individuals or two entities. It's between entity 1 and entity 2, let's say. It's between two very specific entities. And the next thing is, of course, defining the price. And this is obviously something that you continuously optimize. And that's where you need all that ecosystem to help optimize the rule. And the next thing is, of course, you have the growth model, capturing growth. So here, defining the reseller model is very important. So are you convincing your buyer to become a seller of your product? And it's very, very kind of explicit here. It's not the kind of like implicit way of, oh, is my buyer going to recommend my product and is he going to write a G2 crowd review for my product? It's not that. It's very, very directly whether the person is going to help make a sale with 5 to 10% margin or cost of sales. Let's call it cost of sales, cost of resale. And this is obviously the key aspect here because this is going to drive growth completely. And if you think about this model like a little carefully, if you make one great sale, then you get growth for almost free. Now, previously, a lot of this kind of modeling was restricted to software, or like within software also to maybe only open source projects or some very specific kind of like up to some time T. So very, very specific kind of projects. But the idea that I'm trying to project here is if you have a very simplistic model that helps capture complexity, which is what like I think Wolfram Physics Project is about, and a lot of these projects are about. You kind of like can understand and drive sales at a better process, because you can help this to again impact your probability of sale. And my hunch is that the early to mid range of company growth, like if you have early stage companies or mid stage, mid growth companies, they will benefit a lot from this. I'm not very sure about enterprises because I'm not aware of how enterprises actually, like I've never worked at a big, larger enterprise. But I'm pretty certain that like at early stage companies and mid growth stage companies, this kind of modeling might help them understand their sales process a lot more effectively, because it cuts out a lot of the noise and it becomes absolutely clear what we are talking about, and it helps you add complexity as you need. So as you saw here, you can actually go and add complexity, and you can add like more drops here. You can figure out like, oh, let me add a growth hack by adding Facebook based resellers onto the model and so on. So it kind of like helps you capture a lot of these factors, and you get, all you need is like one great sale basically. So to take your company off the charts, you kind of need like one great sale, and then you get growth for free. And of course, making that one great sale will take some time. So a lot of companies will have to iterate for like a couple of years or 3 years or 4 years. And even individuals who are freelancers will keep working, and trying to get to that point where they have something that can, drive growth using this particular model. But I think this is a quite simple model to get started with. I wanted to just explain it and make sure that it's kind of obvious what it's about. So let's just review it. So you have a product and which has a price, and that's in a box, and a customer looks at it and there's a probability of making a sale. Let's call that P. And now you have a seller and a buyer, and there's like P, which is the probability of sale, the price at which the product is being sold, and then the reseller model. So the reseller thing is the growth control factor. It's almost like the growth hormone for, it's almost like the growth equivalent parametric control for sales, and it's the only clear owner of that particular metric here. And in this case, in the way InstaMojo models it, so they have like a margin which you can set maybe a little bit higher above typical payment processes, so maybe 5 to 10%, and give them reseller status, which allows them to award other people reseller status. So that's how complexity gets built. And in this, there are very clear variables, obviously: the seller, the buyer, and the product, the price, the probability of sale, and you kind of have a few independent variables and some dependent variables. And you can take other products like storefronts and build them on top of this model. In fact, even currently they're modeled as such, but it's not very explicitly clear that it is indeed the case. And you could build a lot of ecosystem companies, for example, to get geo analytics for sales, and then you could do companies that specialize in different kinds of drops. Like, let's do an FB drop, let's do a Google drop, which is basically like adapting this growth model for each of these social networks. And when you look at the whole the sales approach here with the InstaMojo or Gumroad kind of models, this is kind of very cool that you can focus on making like one great sale, and if you make that great sale, you'll get growth for free. Otherwise, you keep having this cost to pay, which is adding every reseller takes more effort in terms of time or tooling cost or like that. So you kind of have some way of deciding when you have made that great sale. So, and we can dive deeper into that later. But I thought this is just a very cool way to describe sales and, kind of capture sales in a simplistic model where complexity arises because of causation and not because of, randomness. Okay, so thank you, and hope you had a wonderful day, and hope you learned something from this video. Go do try out InstaMojo and Gumroad. I'll put the links below for one of the products that I'm selling, which is Day Zero Vectors from 2020. It's like 99 rupees or $1.49, but like you can basically just try out this flow and see what it looks like in person.